I'm Jane Hansen. This week in the arena, from New York to Washington and from cyberspace to the Vatican, we're taking a brief look at the issues that have you, the viewers, talking. It's been nearly a year since we last taped the show, and as we begin our new season, we want to take a look at some of the events and topics that have resonated with viewers. Joining us, Monsignor Kieran Harrington, the Director of Communications for the Diocese of Brooklyn. You got a promotion since we last talked.
Yeah.
You get a different
it didn't come
color
with a pay
now,
raise,
right?
though.
All right. Our show's regular contributors, Elizabeth Scalia, author of the blog The Anchoress, and Grant Gallicho, the associate editor of Commonweal magazine. Nice to see you all here. Let's start with something very tame. President Obama, who has been in office for now well over a year, I want a grade. Grant.
B-.
Really?
Yes. I'm
shocked.
Really? Why?
Because I thought you would give him a higher grade than that.
No, I'm a little frustrated by the way the healthcare debate has gone, and I think, by his own admission, he didn't do a very good job explaining what the American people would get from the proposed bills by the Senate and the House. So that's
okay. Elizabeth?
I want to be fair. I'll say a C-.
That's fair.
I think it is.
Tell us more.
I think that I would feel better about President Obama if he had actually governed the way he campaigned. And I don't mean that as continuing the perpetual campaign, which is what he has done. I mean, if he had actually reached out and worked in a bipartisan manner with the opposition and actually listened to the people like he said he was going to do. And he didn't do those things. Instead, he kind of outsourced his job to Nancy Pelosi. And I kind of look at him and say, okay, does he want to be the prince who campaigns all the time, or does he want to be the president? Because right now it seems to me he's the ceremonial prince and Nancy Pelosi's the prime minister.
Okay, grade from you, and then I got a big question for you.
I think that on the economy, there has been a lot to be desired. I do think there's a point to say being focused. I think that he had both houses of Congress, overwhelming majorities. I think there wasn't really there wasn't a real focus on jobs. You have effective unemployment rate at like 17%, 9.7% unemployment, but all these people who are not looking for jobs anymore or who are underemployed, it's a major problem. I think the economy should have been primary concern. I think Grant is right. I think the healthcare debate left a lot to be desired. I think that that was the one big initiative. I think if he would have been able to get health care done, my grade would have probably been a lot higher, because the one big initiative that really would have had a profound consequence going forward, I think you'd have to give him credit for that. I think on foreign policy, I think we've really not had a clear foreign policy, that has, I don't think that we're really projecting a sense that America, Lech Walesa said this, right, that America is not the leader in the world anymore.
Well, didn't it scare you, and all of you guys chime in, when Senator Evan Bayh said he was resigning or not going to run for re-election, and he goes, there's a lot more coming, and Congress is not, he basically was saying that Congress doesn't work anymore, right?
He did seem to say that, yes, that Washington was broken, which is a strange thing to say and then follow with, see you later. You might want to stay in the Senate and work to fix the culture you've identified as broken.
It's really odd to, a year in your presidency, say this is still the other guy's fault when you voted for all of his spending.
Republicans do have to take some responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
when you take a look at the big concern for me, I don't know if you noticed this week, China became is no longer the #1 debtor to the United States. Japan is. And what's interesting about that is if the Chinese, who are using their investment in the treasuries as a vehicle of encouraging policy, a United States policy towards the Dalai Lama, towards Taiwan, if the Chinese start to pull back on their investment in American treasuries, what that's going to do is impact interest rates. And as interest rates rise, that's going to slow down the economy again. So, I mean, these things are really interrelated, and I just think that the president hasn't kept his eye on the ball. However, that being said, I think that President Bush has a large share of responsibility. The Republican Congress.
I'm not saying they spent money very irresponsibly.
Spending money.
Absolutely. But all of these people criticizing voted for all that spending as well.
So how do we take this back to the people that are watching this, that are sitting out there wondering how they're going to pay the rent or pay the mortgage, or are still looking for jobs?
Well, I think that the president promised that he would do a hard pivot away from health care and towards jobs, jobs, jobs. And he's still not. He's still focusing and obsessing on health care.
That's not true. Our healthcare system is a huge drag on our economy. It's pushing up toward 20–25% of our gross domestic product.
But the American people are saying in very large numbers that this particular solution, and I won't even call it the Obama plan because we haven't seen his plan, I will call it the Reid-Pelosi plan, is not the one they want. So I think there's nothing wrong with saying we'll go back to the drawing board. We used to always hear, why won't Bush apologize for making a mistake? Well, I think Obama would win a lot of support. I know I would listen if he said, you know, this didn't work, we're going back to the drawing board and we're going to do something that everybody likes.
They're going to face a lot of pressure, though. The Democrats could be at 53 in the Senate come November, which would be a huge blow. I think the Scott Brown thing was a huge blow to them. I think Evan Bayh is really getting out because he's reading the tea leaves. I mean, they've got problems.
But Evan Bayh was up 20 points in the most recent poll there.
He realizes there's an anti-incumbent
he
atmosphere.
He has $13 million in his campaign fund.
He ran his father's campaign, and he realizes when there is a sea change taking place. That being said, what I think is going to happen here, and this is what is really troubling, is that I think that President Obama has pretty much governed from the center left. But what's going to happen is basically the moderate Democrats are going to get washed away in this because they're the ones in the marginal seats. And who's going to be empowered? The person who's going to be empowered in this equation is going to be Nancy Pelosi because her majority in Congress is a hard left majority, and the only one who's giving her competition, the only one who's given her competition is Steny Hoyer, and Steny Hoyer's supporters. They're the ones who are going to get washed away in a midterm election.
So does it scare you about what you just said about Nancy Pelosi?
I think Nancy. What scares me is I think the hard left in the Democratic Party is very frightening to us. I think that basically their cultural values are antithetical to our beliefs. In fact, I would say not only are they antithetical, I think that there is a real desire to extinguish religion in this country as they see it. I know that seems like an exaggeration, but I'm going to give you an example on the gay marriage debate. Right? This is really important. If you take a look in the early 70s, Bob Jones University had a reprehensible teaching. What was reprehensible is they taught that interracial marriages was immoral. Right? I think everyone here would say that teaching is immoral. Right? We would see that their view is reprehensible. However, the United States Supreme Court ruled that because Bob Jones taught that interracial marriage was immoral, they could be stripped of their tax status. In other words, what the Supreme Court was saying was that because Bob Jones taught something that was not in the national interest, they could be stripped of their tax status. Now let's see what happens in the United States if that starts happening because of some of the moral positions that we're taking. I'm very, very frightened about a hard left Democratic majority.
We've seen things like the legislature in Connecticut and even the legislature in New York trying to impose on Catholics practicing the faith or the church exercising its rights because politically they didn't agree with it.
In Connecticut, what was fascinating is that they single out the Catholic Church and only the Catholic Church to take away control of administration.
But can I say, before we get off on that, yes, okay, I don't particularly care for the hard left. I don't particularly care for the hard right as well. And I think the Tea Partiers, I don't think they're hard right because I know too many independents who are in there, but the Tea Partiers are really bound and determined to elect people into Congress who are on the hard right. And then we're going to have this even more polarized Congress than we have now. And I'm just waiting for somebody to stand up and say, look, here's the problem. Okay, all these people need health care. 30 million people need health care. Why does it have to affect the lives of 300 million? Why does it have to affect the insurance and health care of 300 million people?
Because that's how risk pools work, Elizabeth.
Wait a minute. You know, there's other ways to do this, Grant.
Such as?
Let's take a look at what Rudy Giuliani did in New York City when he realized a lot of people don't have insurance and they can't afford it. I'm going to let them buy into the city's plan. Okay? Why can't people without insurance have the option of buying into the government plan? That's not a solution for all of the problems, but it at least gets the people who want insurance.
That's in the Senate bill.
Wait a second. The people who want insurance.
That's in the Senate bill.
Okay, but where we don't go from there is, now I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I'm sure you'll come back to it.
Insurance buying across state lines is one way.
It'll be just like credit card companies, and it'll be a race to the bottom. Whoever has the fewest regulations.
You know, right now you have small business owners; they can't get into associations to buy health insurance. That's a problem. There's certainly a question of tort reform that really needs to be taken.
I think you're also scaring the heck out of people when you're talking about mandates. When you're talking about Nancy Pelosi talking about you're going to be charged $2,500 or thrown in jail if you don't buy insurance. People have the right to not buy insurance. This is America.
But people don't have the right not to buy car insurance.
But people do have the right
because
to
that's
not buy
affecting
health
other
insurance.
people.
Right, and that's exactly what's happening with our
with
our health insurance.
And that is the problem.
So I think we're probably going to agree to disagree on all of these subjects, although I would like to. There was one brief aspect of this whole area of politics. You brought up the Tea Party. Mm-hmm. Sarah Palin. Yes?
I think that many people watched Sarah Palin get truly savaged by the press when she was on McCain's ticket, because the press really went overboard, and they're now so protective of her that they're not always.
The press is protective of her?
No. These Palin supporters are so protective of her that they are not in the mood to even take constructive criticism on her. And I think that's dangerous for her, because she has no limits right now in their eyes, and she can do no wrong, and there's nothing reining her in.
I thought it was fascinating that her appearance at the Tea Party convention wasn't more popular. The room was only about half full. Now, I know that it wasn't a cheap ticket, which is a strange thing for a populist movement, but I wonder whether her popularity is waning.
There were a lot of Tea Partiers who did not go to that convention because they had problems and issues with some of the people running it. So I think that
I would think that it was probably pretty expensive, but they had to collect money at the door to be able to pay Sarah,
her
right?
$100,000.
So there we are. We are going to take a break. There's a lot more to talk about. I promise it's not going to be just about politics. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment to continue this conversation. Welcome back to In the Arena as we continue our discussion on subjects close and dear to our heart. Did you guys know that it's Lent?
I seem to recall that.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, it occurred to me, I'm wondering, do people make sacrifices anymore?
My poor husband came home and said, I don't know what to do. I'm thinking I might sacrifice coffee. And I said, please don't. You were miserable the last time.
And not only if he does it, you'll be miserable.
Exactly.
Right. A lot of people still make sacrifices, and I think that, Ash Wednesday I always think is a fascinating day, because it seems like everybody comes out for Ash Wednesday. It's almost, I think about it, getting ashes for people is like getting a tattoo. Right? It's something. It's that indelible mark.
It's really tribal. It's almost like a tribal mark.
But I think and I think everyone comes forward with the notion that they do want their life to be better. They do want their life to be holier. They do want to be closer to God. Sometimes it's very hard to do that. It's a real challenge. But I think that most people do think about, what am I going to try to make sacrifice? How am I going to try to sacrifice for my husband, for my wife, for my children, so that I can be closer to God?
I was actually lecturing and reading the line, rend your hearts, not your garments. And if you look out, people were really like, yeah, I'm ready for that. I want to do that. What does it mean? And, I think I love that whole image of rend your heart. Just open up your heart, expose yourself to God, drain out all the poison. Maybe I should be sacrificing politics.
Ever see that commercial? P90. It's like they have all these exercises. If you go do this for 90 days, you'll have a ripped body. So you won't look like me. You'll be all ripped up.
That's a good idea.
And I think that
if
you think about that, a lot of people, everyone sees that and would say, I wish I had that kind of body. I wish I could do that. I wish I had that kind of discipline. I want to do it. But unfortunately, a lot of people can't do it.
Right.
I think Lent is like that for people too. It's what people want
It's only 90 days. I mean, you can do almost anything for that period of time, right?
Maybe you can, but I don't think people think that way. It's like, coming into Lent, this one verse in Scripture kept coming out in front of me. Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, God, all right. yeah, you're more to me than 10 pieces of Hershey's Kisses. You're more to me than, 10 days of fun in the sun. Yeah, I don't know if you're more to me than this other thing. That's a question I have to ask myself.
Yeah, exactly.
And
well, it is supposed to be the time of repentance and forgiveness,
Yeah.
etc. So I'm going to go directly now to another subject, Tiger Woods.
I think Americans love this kind of thing. I mean, that is, it's a great, the fall, the redemption. I don't know if he's going to be redeemed, but it's clear that he had and is working on a pretty serious pathological behavior problem. And I don't know. I mean, I think there's something really salacious about the story, of course, and that's why it's in the tabloids. And so
I think we ought to forgive ourselves. It's not my place to forgive Tiger Woods, but I think we really need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves why we need to be such voyeurs into his life.
There's all kinds of examples from the past year alone that we could give you about people who've there been stories of an affair or stories of some kind of behavior that truly goes against a Christian moral value.
And that's why I don't know why we're so focused on him.
Because it's not just Christian moral values, it goes against what it is to be a human being. I think that's the challenge. I mean, that was the tragedy for him, right? Is that it had such a destructive impact on his life and the life of his children. I think that, in America, all things are permitted. We're a society where everything goes, and yet we don't forgive anything. And the media is the most unforgiving of all, right? In many ways, you could take a look at read the Post and see often what the Post promotes in terms of salacious qualities that they would promote. And at the same time, here's a person who has fallen, and there's zero forgiveness. So from my perspective, I think that this is a real problem in America, where everything is permitted here, but we don't seem to forgive people. And the challenge is with forgiveness, and I even think
we give
about
them all kinds of second chances consistently.
Well, can I tell you? I think about when I think about forgiveness, I think about Peter and Judas. Peter and Judas basically do the same thing. Both deny Christ. One betrays him. Both are sorry that they've done that, right? And we know that Judas throws the gold coins back at the priest. So both are sorry for what they've done. The difference is that Peter believes he can be forgiven, and Judas doesn't. And I think that what traps a lot of people in America is that they don't believe they can be forgiven. They're trapped in sin. And hopefully the message of the gospel is to invite them to experience redemption, to experience God's mercy and forgiveness, because it's not something that they're doing, but it's a gift that God is offering them.
If we can, thank you. I'd like to switch subjects now and go talk about something that's been going on in the Vatican, which is that the Pope has been meeting with Irish bishops over this whole sex abuse report. Of course, we know that some of the bishops resigned late last year, but he's bringing them in. Obviously, it's a small country, but he's brought them all in to really sit down and discuss what happened there. Is this Pope much more determined to deal with this sex abuse scandal than the Church has ever been before?
I think he's shown a great deal of fortitude. And when he was in his last job, before he was Pope, he met with the members of the USCCB, the American Bishops' Sex Abuse Board. He gave them several hours, and the people who went over there from the States came back with a very favorable sense of his commitment to rooting out this problem. Now, it will never be completely gone, but I do think that the Pope grasps not just the moral problem here, but also the structural problem.
One of the key moments for him might have been also when he came to the United States for his pastoral visit, and at the request of Archbishop O'Malley, met with victims of sexual abuse. And I think that it's very often, and you have to understand that the history of the church in communist countries and everything, a lot of times there were a lot of rumors spread about priests to discredit the church. And so it's very easy then to discount. I think when he met with the victims, spoke with them, saw their pain, felt their pain, I think that transformed him.
But I also think that he came into his papacy understanding that this was something he was going to work on. If you remember one of his first prayers, when he realized that he was about to be elected, his first prayer was, "Lord, don't do this to me." But one of his first prayers after that was talking about rooting out filth from the church. And that was a surprising word for him to use. So I think he's always had this intention and awareness, and I think he's being pretty fearless about it.
We are going to take a break. On that note, thank you. We'll continue this conversation in just a moment. Welcome back to In the Arena, discussing lots of issues that are hot topics in the Diocese of Brooklyn. And of course, charter schools has been playing a big role in this kind of conversation for a long time. You said you have an idea.
I do have an idea. Ready? What was supposed to pay for education in the state of New York and didn't really do it?
The lottery.
The lottery. What about a Catholic lotto? A buck, you get your 6 numbers. It's like playing the numbers. And it funds Catholic schools so that they can reduce their tuition rates and more people can take advantage.
Elizabeth Scalia, bookie.
Figure out how to make it work legally.
I don't see why we couldn't. I don't see why we couldn't do it.
You guys probably all watched the Super Bowl. The Saints won. Was that a miracle?
I think it was a great game. 2 teams with great stories.
Is it time for
And
baseball
I was certainly
yet?
rooting for
It's
the
soon, spring
Saints.
training.
I have a confession. I turned it off after the first half.
Did you really?
Because it was too depressing and the commercials were not good enough.
But did you see the Tim Tebow?
I did.
Pro-life commercial?
Sort of, yes.
It got all sorts of coverage, and it was exactly the opposite of what anyone would have expected.
Yeah, I think they completely played the pro-choice lobby.
They did.
It was a pretty good rope-a-dope. There was this big controversy because there was going to be this pro-life ad, and the CBS had turned down this pro-gay marriage ad, apparently, and
What was really funny was watching the pro-choice people try to save face by saying, well, that was a terrible act of violence against women.
Is that what they said?
Yes, they came out and said this advocated violence against women.
Because he tackled his
Yes.
mom and...
And then also because Betty White got tackled and Abe Vigoda in the Snickers commercial.
Is Abe Vigoda a woman?
I guess he's an old person and maybe you're genderless at that point.
Maybe there needs to be a sense of humor at times in some of this stuff. I
thought the ad was pretty clever. It was not. It didn't beat anyone over the head. It was just a very powerful story that was told briefly, and it had some humor. It may have distracted from the message with the tackling, but otherwise pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about one more thing. This from the Vatican, which is, previously denounced rock music. Here it is, the Vatican newspaper's list of best albums, including the Beatles, Michael Jackson, U2, but no Bob Dylan.
Where was Bob Dylan?
Don't know.
And he just came out with a Christmas album. I mean, I feel bad for him.
What it says, quote, the albums are perfect listening material for anyone who finds himself marooned on an island. Does this mean that the Vatican is taking a much less firm stance?
Oh, I don't know, but Achtung Baby is one of the greatest albums ever, and we have a German Pope. It kind of speaks for itself.
There is a real, I think, push internally in the Vatican. The church has always been at the sort of the forefront of culture, patron of the arts and music. And I think that there is a desire to capture that mantle back. That, right now, if you take a look at the architecture in the United States of many of the new churches, it's really not. It's not inspiring. A lot of the religious art is less than edifying, and certainly the music has been abysmal.
Awful.
So, I mean, if you take a look
You
at...
guys are so grouchy. They've built some great cathedrals.
But not lately.
Yes, but they're older.
You're kidding. You want to take a
They're
look
not
at some of
new.
these
What are you
cathedrals
talking
that
about?
are...
You're not talking about LA.
I am.
Oh, God almighty.
Have you been there?
If it weren't for the tapestries, that thing would be a bomb shelter.
If you spend any time in there and
have spent
look
time there.
and actually look at it,
It's awful.
it's not awful. It's actually very powerful.
The Pope is an artist. He's a musician, so this doesn't surprise me. And he did just speak to artists and musicians recently and bring them all together at the Vatican. So I think it's great that he's putting energy into this.
The other day I was at, a couple of weeks ago, I was at the Vatican Museum, and one of the things that now you could see a lot of the modern art and seeing, it really is a challenge, right? Because sacred art is so inspiring in many ways. Modern art is a little more, is very much involved with an existential kind of notion. And so trying to understand modern art is a little different.
But don't you bring your own understanding to it?
Well, I think that's fundamentally this is the big question of art, right? Is it the meaning that I'm apprehending from the piece that is out there, or am I imposing a meaning onto the piece? And that's the real question.
I have a great friend who's an artist who says, you take away from the piece what you want to take away from it. It is not for me to tell you what it is. It's only me to create it.
You see, and I think that that's fundamentally the difference, philosophical difference in the world today, is that there's not objective truth. You have your truth, I have my truth. For me, it's hard to...
Okay, I understand. It's hard to be there. Last word, because we got to go. What else are we going to talk about as this show proceeds?
New studies coming out on stem cells. I'm looking forward to debating that.
Derek Jeter's getting married uncrushed.
Now, there's a guy who, for however his private life is lived out, he has really kept himself in a place where there's no gossip. The guy, or whatever there is good.
And if he pulled a Tiger Woods, I think all of New York would just be devastated. But I don't even think it would be about forgiveness. I think it would just be, hari-kari all over the city.
So you love Derek Jeter.
I love Derek
That's
Jeter.
the message. And Father, for you, Monsignor?
We have a big reconfiguration process. Christ, Jesus, our hope, going on in the Diocese of Brooklyn now as we kind of look and say the financial impact has really hurt the church. What's it going to do to parishes, schools? How are we going to preach the gospel in the future?
Catholic
All of
Lotto.
that to come forward. Catholic Lotto, she says. You guys talk amongst yourselves. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. Remember that you don't need a TV to watch the net. We are always online at www.netny.net. For all of us here, I'm Jane Hansen. See you next time in the arena.